explained what I intended to do and why. I asked her, plainly, whether she could confirm in my chart that I was alert, oriented, and fully capable of making my own legal and financial decisions. She looked at me for a long moment, the kind of look one tired, competent woman gives another, and she said yes. She said my labs were stable, my oxygen was good, I was lucid and clear, and that in her medical judgment I had full capacity. She offered to note it in my record and to witness the signing herself if it would help. I told her it would help more than she knew. My night nurse, Donna, a sturdy woman with reading glasses on a chain and zero tolerance for nonsense, agreed to be the second witness. I'd watched Donna run that unit for 2 nights with a steadiness I recognized, and I trusted her instinctively. By the time Joel walked in with his briefcase, everything was in place. A doctor to confirm my mind, a nurse to witness my hand, a lawyer to make it real. For the first time in days, I felt like myself again. Not the patient. The woman who builds things properly, so that no one can tear them down later. Joel set his briefcase on the foot of my bed and laid the papers out on the rolling tray table, the same table they'd been bringing my untouched meals on for 2 days. It became, in that moment, the most important desk I have ever signed at. One by one, he walked me through them, plain and unhurried, the doctor on one side of the bed and Donna on the other. First, the change of beneficiary on the life insurance. My parents' names came off. In their place went Eli, and a second name that surprised even me as I said it, a caregiver relief fund I'd been meaning to start at my own company for years, a small endowment for the aides who break down caring for everyone else. Second, the new will, redirecting my estate along the same lines. Third, the order halting the automatic monthly payments to my parents' assisted living account. And fourth, the formal withdrawal of the down payment funds for Bridget's house, signed and dated before the wire could clear. I read each page. I understood each page. And then I signed my name, my own steady hand, the doctor watching, Donna witnessing, Joel notarizing. There was no drama to it. No tears, no speeches. Just the quiet scratch of a pen, over and over, rewriting my life so that it finally pointed at the people who'd actually shown up. When the last signature was dry, I sat back against the pillows and felt lighter than I had in years. I looked at Joel, and at the doctor, and at Donna, and I said the only thing that captured it. I signed my whole life over to the people who actually showed up, I told them. From the bed, the rest of them couldn't be bothered to visit. Donna, witnessing her 100th quiet human catastrophe, just nodded once, like she'd seen this exact reckoning before, and was glad this time to be on the right side of it. Joel gathered the signed, witnessed, notarized documents back into his briefcase, copies for me, originals filed where they needed to go. At the door, he paused and looked back at me, and there was something in his face that wasn't quite a smile, but was close to respect. "It's done," he said. "It's clean. Nobody's undoing this." Then he left, and the room was quiet again, just me and the monitor and Eli, who had stepped out for coffee and come back to find his whole family rearranged on a tray table and asked no questions, because Eli has always understood that some decisions explain themselves. I did not call my parents to tell them what I'd done. I did not text the group chat. I felt no urge to announce it, no need to throw it in anyone's face. That isn't who I am, and besides, the whole point of doing it quietly and correctly was that it didn't depend on their reaction at all. It was simply true now, witnessed and filed, whether they ever found out or not. I lay back and closed my eyes. Somewhere across town, my mother was unpacking a kitchen and feeling blessed. Somewhere, my sister was arranging throw pillows in a house she didn't yet know had stopped being possible. And here I was, in the bed none of them had visited. Finally, strangely, at peace. They would find out eventually. People always do. The assisted living office would send a letter. The bank would flag the missing funds. And then, only then, they would come. I was sure of it. The day the money stopped, they would finally remember they had a daughter. I just intended to be recovered enough by then to be sitting up when they walked in. I was right, of course. It just took a few days. By the 3rd day, I'd been moved out of the ICU into a regular room, the clot stabilized, the danger behind me, a long, boring recovery and months of blood thinners ahead. Eli came every day after school. He brought me real food and bad magazines and sat with me, and we talked more in those few days than we had in years, 2 siblings discovering, late, that they actually liked each other. My parents still did not call. Bridget still did not call. The silence, which had once felt like a wound, now felt almost like a courtesy, a window of peace before the storm I knew was coming. The storm started with the bank. My business accountant, who I'd looped in, let me know the down payment withdrawal had gone through cleanly, the funds pulled back before they could transfer to the title company for Bridget's house, which meant that somewhere, in some closing office, a wire that was supposed to arrive simply hadn't. I pictured it without much feeling. A loan officer frowning at a screen, a title agent making an awkward phone call. My sister's brand new house, the one full of unpacked boxes and arranged throw pillows, quietly developing a hole in its foundation that no amount of pizza could fill. I was not gleeful about it. I want to be honest, because I think honesty is the only thing that makes a story like this worth telling. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a kind of grim, level calm, the calm of a woman watching a consequence she didn't create, but had finally stopped preventing. For 36 years, I'd been the safety net. I'd just stopped catching them, and gravity was about to do the rest. Dennis was the first to feel it, because Dennis is the kind of man who feels money before he feels anything else. He called Eli, not me, because it apparently still hadn't occurred to anyone to call the woman in the hospital directly. Eli put it on speaker and we listened together, his eyebrows climbing higher with every sentence. Dennis was rattled. The bank was saying the down payment hadn't come through, the closing was in jeopardy, the sellers were threatening to walk. Did Eli know what was going on? Was there some mix-up? Because Kara had promised? Kara always came through. Kara was reliable. There it was again. Kara always comes through. Kara is reliable. The same sentence in a man's panicked voice that my mother had used my whole life to mean I never had to think about her needs. Eli, bless him, kept his voice flat and just said he didn't know anything about Kara's finances and that maybe they should ask Kara, who was, he reminded Dennis pointedly, still in the hospital. There was a small, telling pause on the line. You could almost hear Dennis remembering, with annoyance, that I was sick, as if my illness were now an inconvenient obstacle to my usefulness. They still didn't get it. That's what struck me, listening. Even now, with the money gone, they weren't worried about me. They were worried about what my absence was costing them. I want to pause and ask you something, because I genuinely want to know. Have you ever realized that your family valued what you provided more than they valued you? That the love was really just billing? If you have, tell me in the comments. You are not alone, and you are not wrong to have felt the difference. After Dennis hung up, Eli looked at me and said quietly, "They have no idea, do they?" They didn't, but they were about to. Bridget called me directly that evening, the first time my sister had called me, not texted, not heart emoji'd, but actually called, since before I collapsed. For one foolish second I thought maybe Dennis had finally told her how sick I'd been, that this was the call where she said she was sorry, where she asked how I was, where she remembered she had a sister and not just a benefactor. That is not what the call was. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't mention the ICU. She got right to it, her voice tight with a stress that had nothing to do with my lung. "Kara, hey, is there some problem with the down payment? The bank's saying the money didn't come, and Dennis is freaking out, and we could lose the house. Did something happen with your account? Did something happen with your account?" I lay there in my hospital bed, 4 days after she'd left me on red, while I might have been dying, and I listened to my sister's only concern be whether my account was working, and I felt the last thread of something snap, gently, with no pain at all. I said, evenly, "Bridget, I called our parents 9 times from the ICU. You texted me a heart emoji and told me to rest up." There was a silence. "What does that have to do with the house?" she said, and the honest confusion in her voice told me everything. She truly did not connect them. The version of me that almost died and the version of me that funded her life were, to her, 2 completely separate accounts, and only one of them had ever interested her. "It has everything to do with the house," I said, "but I'm not going to explain it over the phone. If you want to talk about it, all of you, you can come see me. You remember where I am. You've had the address for 4 days." My mother started calling within the hour. Bridget must have hung up and called her in a panic, because suddenly my phone, which had sat silent and dark through the worst 2 days of my life, would not stop lighting up with my mother's name. Once, twice, 5 times. The very thing I had begged for from the ICU, my mother's face on my screen, was finally happening. days too late. And now that it was here, I felt nothing but a clean, cold clarity. I did not pick up. I want you to understand that this was not pettiness, not an eye for an eye. I genuinely had nothing to say to her over the phone, and I knew, from a lifetime of experience, exactly how a phone call with my mother goes. She talks. She reframes. She finds the angle where she is the wronged party and I am the difficult one, and she does it so fast and so smoothly that I end up apologizing before I've remembered what I was upset about. She is a master of the medium of the phone call, where there are no witnesses and no paper, only her voice and my old, trained instinct to soothe her. So no, not on the phone. If my mother wanted to have this conversation, she would have it in person, in the room she hadn't visited, in front of the people who had seen me sign my name. She would have it on my ground for once, where her voice was just a voice, and the documents were real and witnessed and could not be talked away. I let every call ring out, the way she had let mine. Then I turned my phone face down, looked at Eli and said, "They're coming tomorrow. I can feel it." He nodded. "You want me here?" "Yes," I said. "And Joel, I want this done right." I spent that night getting ready the only way I know how, which is to get my facts in order and decide, in advance, who I was going to be when the room filled up. I asked Joel to come by in the morning and to bring copies of everything: the witness beneficiary change, the new will, the halted payment order, the withdrawal confirmation. Not to wave in anyone's face, just to have on the tray table, quiet and real, so that nothing I said could be dismissed as a sick woman's threat. I called Joel and walked him through it, and he gave me one piece of advice that I wrote down on the back of a hospital menu. "Don't argue with them," he said. "Whatever your mother says, however she spins it, don't defend yourself. The second you argue, it stops being about what's true and starts being about who's louder, and she's had 60 years of practice being louder. You don't have to win a fight. You just have to tell them what's already done and let the paper say the rest. Don't argue. Let the paper say the rest." I'd known Joel a long time, and he'd never once given me bad counsel. I lay in the dark and rehearsed being calm. I thought about every family confrontation I'd ever lost, every time my mother's certainty had steamrolled my facts, every time I'd walked away having somehow agreed I was the problem. And I realized the thing that had always beaten me wasn't her argument. It was my own need for her approval, the need that made me flinch and fold. But something in me had changed in that ICU. The need was gone. You cannot manipulate a person who has stopped hoping you'll love them correctly. For the first time in my life, I had nothing left for my mother to take. It was my father who called last, late that night, alone. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Maybe because his name on the screen has never carried the same weight as my mother's. His voice was small and rough, like he'd been sitting somewhere in the dark working up to it. "Kara," he said. "Honey, Bridget told us about the hospital, about how bad it was." A long pause, the sound of an old man trying to find words he'd never practiced. "Is it true you called 9 times, that first day?" I said it was. I heard him breathe out, shaky, and when he spoke again, his voice broke clean in half. "I had my phone in my pocket the whole time," he said. "I felt it buzzing. I thought it was the moving company. Your mother said don't worry about it. Finish the couch. We'll check it later." And I listened to her. I listened to her instead of my own daughter. He started to cry then. My quiet, undramatic father, the man I have maybe seen cry twice in my life. "I almost lost you," he said, "and I was carrying a couch." I let him cry. I didn't rush to make it okay, the way I would have my whole life. But I wasn't cruel to him either, because my father's sin was always cowardice, never malice. And there is a difference. "Dad," I said finally gently, "I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. But things are going to be different now. I need you to know that before tomorrow." He was quiet. Then he said the thing that told me he was the only one who'd actually understood. "I know," he said. "I'm just glad you're alive to make them different. I'll be there in the morning. I'm coming whether she does or not." They came the next morning, all of them, filing into my hospital room like a delegation. My mother led, of course. She came in first, and she came in glowing, with a grocery store bouquet wrapped in crinkling plastic and a smile so bright and so practiced that for a second I almost admired it. There was no apology in that smile. There was no fear, no shame, none of the haunted look my father wore as he came in behind her. My mother had decided, somewhere on the drive over, that the way to handle this was to skip straight past the last 5 days as if they hadn't happened, to flood the room with cheer until everyone agreed to pretend along with her. She set the flowers on my tray table, right on top of the very space where I'd signed everything away, and she leaned down and kissed my forehead and said, "Oh, sweetheart, look at you. You gave us such a scare. But you're the strong one. I knew you'd pull through just fine." There it was. The sentence of my entire life, delivered over a bouquet, in front of my brother and my lawyer and a sister and brother-in-law hovering anxious by the door. "You're the strong one. I knew you'd pull through fine." As if my survival had been a foregone conclusion. As if her absence had been a vote of confidence rather than a verdict. And then, barely a breath later, before I had even responded, she got to what she'd actually come for. "Now," she said, settling into the chair beside my bed with the air of a woman taking charge of a small mess. "Bridget tells me there's some confusion with the bank, some mix-up with the house money. So let's just sort that out, shall we? I'm sure it's nothing we can't fix. Let's just sort that out." I looked at my mother's bright, expectant face, and I understood she still, even now, had absolutely no idea what was about to happen. I did not raise my voice. This is the part I want you to picture clearly, because it is the whole of who I decided to be in that room. My mother had just breezed past my near death and gone straight for the money, in front of witnesses, and every instinct I'd been raised with told me to either soothe her or scream. I did neither. I reached over, and I gently moved her bouquet off the tray table, and I nodded to Joel, who stepped forward and laid a small stack of papers down in the space where the flowers had been. Then I folded my hands and I told them, quietly, what I had done. I told them that on the second day in this hospital, when none of them had come, when none of them had called, I had asked my lawyer to meet me here. I told them I had removed them as beneficiaries of my life insurance, that I had rewritten my will, that I had stopped the automatic payments that had been quietly covering their assisted living for years, payments I was fairly sure my mother believed came from a pension or the government or thin air, because she had never once asked, and that I had withdrawn the down payment for Bridget's house before it cleared, which was why the bank had no money to give them. I said it all in the flat, even voice I used to deliver hard numbers to nervous clients. No venom, no flourish, just the facts, set down one at a time like coins on a counter. The room had gone completely silent. My mother's smile was still on her face, but it had frozen, stranded there, a smile that no longer had a thought behind it. And into that silence I said the only line I had let myself prepare, the truest sentence I have ever spoken to my mother. "I called you 9 times from this bed," I said. "You came when the couch was in, so I changed everything from the bed you didn't visit." My mother came apart the way a dropped plate comes apart all at once, in pieces. The frozen smile collapsed, and what was underneath it was not grief, not shame, but fury, hot and immediate and aimed entirely at me. She stood up out of the chair. She told me I was cruel. She told me I was punishing the whole family over a misunderstanding, that she'd had no idea it was serious, that the messages got lost, that I should have made it clearer, as if 9 calls and the words intensive care were a riddle she couldn't be expected to solve. She called me ungrateful. She said, and this is the part that told me everything. "You did this to us from a hospital bed? What kind of daughter sits in a hospital and plots against her own parents?" Plots. As if surviving and then telling the truth were a conspiracy. As if the crime in the room was my paperwork and not her absence. I let her finish. And then Joel, who had been standing quietly by the window, spoke up in the calm, unbothered voice of a man who has watched many people discover that reality has paperwork. He said that everything I'd signed had been executed properly, that my physician had documented my full mental capacity in my chart, that 2 witnesses, the doctor and the nurse, had observed the signing, that it was notarized, filed, and entirely valid, and that there were no grounds whatsoever to contest it. Donna, who had come in to check my line and stayed near the door reading the room, added her own quiet sentence. "I witnessed it," she said. She was clear as a bell, clearest person I've met all week. My mother looked from Joel to Donna to the papers on the tray, and I watched her understand finally that there was no angle here, no version of the story she could talk her way into, no phone call where she got to be the wronged one. And I said, still calm, The thing I'd waited 36 years to say. You called me strong so you'd never have to show up. Well, I was strong enough to stop. Bridget had been standing frozen by the door through all of it, and now the full shape of it landed on her. She understood at last that the money for her house, the house with the unpacked boxes and the arranged throw pillows and the kitchen our mother had photographed, had been mine all along. That it was gone because she had left me on red. Her face crumpled. "You're taking my house," she whispered, and there was real fear in it, the fear of a woman who has never once had to stand without a net. I looked at my sister, and I felt something that surprised me, not triumph. Something closer to sadness. Because I'd had a net my whole life too, the net of being needed, and it had cost me just as much as her dependence was about to cost her. "I'm not taking anything, Bridget," I said. "I'm just not paying for it anymore. There's a difference, even if nobody in this family ever taught us what it was." Dennis, who had been so loud on the phone, said nothing at all, which was its own small justice. And then I gave my sister back the words she had sent me, gently, the way you return something a person dropped. "You called me the day the money stopped," I said. "Not the day I almost did." She had no answer for that. None of them did. The room held its silence, the monitor beeping out my heartbeat. Steady now. Strong now. The heartbeat they hadn't bothered to come listen to when it might have stopped. My father had sat down in the corner with his face in his hands. Eli stood beside my bed with one hand on my shoulder. And for the first time in my entire life, in a room full of my family, I was not the one apologizing. I did not leave them with nothing. I want to tell you that, because I know the satisfying ending is the one where they get exactly what they gave, and I understand the appeal. But I am not built that way, and more importantly, I didn't want to become the kind of person who could be. So before they left that room, I laid out the one path I was willing to walk. I told my parents that I would consider restoring a portion of the assisted living support. Not the insurance, not the will. Those were done, and they were Eli's now, and mine to give where I chose. But the monthly care, the roof over their heads, I would help with that again, on conditions, and I had Joel write them down so that no one could pretend later that the terms were different. First, they had to acknowledge, out loud and in plain words, that they had left me alone when I might have died. Not a vague apology, the actual thing. Second, whatever this family was going forward, it had to run in both directions. I was done being a beam that holds up a house no one invites me into. If they wanted a daughter, they had to be parents, which meant showing up when it was inconvenient, when there was nothing to be gained, when it was just love and a hospital chair at 3 a.m. My father signed before I'd even finished explaining, his hand shaking, and he stayed that night, in the awful vinyl chair next to Eli's, 2 men keeping watch over a daughter and a sister they'd nearly lost. My mother took the longest. She stood by the window with her arms crossed for a long time, and I honestly didn't know if she could do it. But the papers were real, and the witnesses were real, and for the first time in her life, there was no version of the story that put her in the right. Finally, stiffly, looking not quite at me, she said it. "I should have come." 3 small words, and they cost her more than anything she'd ever given me. It wasn't much. It wasn't the mother I'd wanted my whole life, but it was true. And it was a beginning, and at 36, with a clot dissolving in my lung and my brother asleep in a chair beside me, I decided that a true beginning was enough to build on. Bridget bought a smaller house, eventually, with her own money, and I went home, finally, to a life I had quietly rewritten to point at the people who'd actually been in the room. Family isn't measured by who shares your blood. It's measured by who shows up in the room when the machines are beeping and nobody's getting anything out of it. If you made it all the way to the end, you already know that ache, the ache of being the strong one nobody checks on. 9 unanswered calls, a couch that mattered more than a daughter, a lawyer in the ICU. Maybe you've been the beam holding up a house you were never invited into. If Kara's quiet line, finally drawn, gave you a little strength tonight, tell me in the comments who actually showed up for you when it counted. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Calm Drama Stories, because the people who hold everyone else together deserve, at least once, to be the one who gets held. Your story might be the one we tell next.